Okay class, in this video we're going to host virtual machines in our cluster. So just like the other video, we're going to set up a disk for us to use for this purpose. So I'm going to sign into the iSCSI. Again, if you've waited any time between this lab and the last lab, I would reboot all four of these machines. DC first, let it fully come up, the iSCSI second, let it fully come up, then the FOC1 and FOC2 next. So just to get back to a clean slate, I'm going to go to the server manager, I'm going to go to File and Storage Services, then iSCSI. I'm going to create a new disk. And it's going to be on this machine, on this E drive. Because remember, if I had added any machines to this manager up here, all those machines I've added, I can manage from this interface. Right now, I don't have any machines added to this server console. I only added machines to the server console on FOC1. I'm going to go to FOC1. I want to look at something. Now this disk is going to be different than the other two disks that we created. We're going to use it in a different way. Okay, I'm going to go back. I can't see it right now because the disk isn't added. I'm going to call it Clustered Shared Volume. I can't remember if it's Clustered Shared Volume or if that acronym, I'm messing it up. That's what I was looking for. But the witness disk and the DHCP disk that we created earlier can only be mounted to one machine at a time. But what we're going to do now is we're going to create a disk. It's going to be mounted to one machine, but then it's going to be shared to both machines from that one machine. So we're going to mount this disk to one machine, and then we're going to share it to both machines, so both machines will be able to access the disk at one time. And that's important because on this disk, we're going to put VHDs for virtual machines. And these VHDs could be 80 gigs, 90 gigs big. And when we try to mount an 80 gig disk from here to here quickly, it'll cause a problem. So let's say FOC1 fails. We want to be able to host that virtual machine on FOC2 very quickly. But if we have to take time to mount an 80, 90 gig disk to another machine, it's going to cause a problem. So this clustered share volume is going to be, it's going to appear as if it's mounted to both machines at the same time. And at that point, if this machine fails, this machine over here will automatically have access to the disk because it's going to be on the clustered shared volume. So we're going to save all our virtual hard disk for all the virtual machines we're going to host in our cluster on the clustered shared volume. So I'm going to click Next. I don't have a lot of space on this machine, but I'm only going to make it 5 gigs. In reality, I might make this 5 terabytes big. But for right now, I'm just going to create it 5 gigs just to demonstrate this functionality. And I would probably make it fixed size, because when you make it dynamic size, there's a slight performance loss every time it tries to expand that disk. Fixed size, it doesn't do that, because if I say I want a 4 terabyte disk, it's going to create it's going to use 4 terabytes off the disk immediately of disk space. Dynamically expanding, it might start off as 4 meg, then span up to 4 terabytes. But for right now, I'm just going to create a 5 gigabit disk and have it dynamically expanding. Click Next. I'm going to attach it to FOC1 and FOC2. Those are both in target 01. When I set that up, then create. So now I need to go update the iSCSI initiators on FOC1 and FOC2, mount that disk and format it. So I'm going to do that from FOC1 first. I'm going to go to Tools, iSCSI Initiator, Volumes and Devices. I have currently 2 disks. Auto-config, I see the 3rd disk now. Click OK. I'm going to right-click, go to Disk Management. I'm going to bring that new disk online. I'm going to initialize it, then format it. Sorry, that's the wrong disk. See how both these disks say reserved? Because they're being used by the cluster process. This disk is offline. This is our new disk. I'm going to initialize it. I'm only creating 1 partition on here, so MBR is fine. And then I'm going to create a new volume. Clustered shared volume. So that disk is being formatted. It's done. So now I'm going to go to FOC2 and make sure that machine is aware of the new disk. Tools, Failover Cluster Manager. Maybe not. Tools, iSCSI Initiator. Go to Volume and Devices, hit Auto Config, and click OK. Guys, if I gave it a little bit of time, it would automatically discover this disk, but I'm just trying to rush it. Okay. Both FOC1 and FOC2 are aware of the new disk. So now I'm going to back to FOC1. And I'm going to add that disk to my failover cluster. So I'm going to drill down into Storage, Disk, Add Disk. You can see that disk, it's 5 gigs. It's currently attached to FOC1. I'm going to highlight that disk. When we installed failover clustering, it created this folder called Cluster Storage. And right now it's empty. And on FOC2, it also has that clustered storage folder. So now I'm going to go back to the FOC1. So both of those cluster members have that folder under my C drive. So I'm going to highlight the disk that I just added, and I'm going to say add to clustered shared volume. You can't see it, but it's clustered shared volume, CSV. Now I can see it's a clustered shared volume. Now if I go to my C drive in clustered storage, I now have a volume 1. It's still mounted to FOC1, but it's being shared as volume 1 under this folder. So FOC1 always has access to that clustered shared volume. If I go to FOC2 and go into clustered storage, it also has volume 1. It's being mounted on FOC1 and being shared as a volume under the clusters folder, under the cluster storage folder on both FOC1 and FOC2. It's mounted to FOC1, then shared as a cluster storage on FOC1 and FOC2. Both always have access to it. So if I create a blank document here, I'm going to call it new, and I go over to FOC1 and go into that volume, there's the file. So if I create another one, I'm going to create a folder this time. And when I go to FOC2, there's the folder. So it appears as both machines are mounting that drive, but in actuality, only one cluster member will mount the drive, but shared on both of them. If FOC1 fails, that clustered shared volume will be then automatically mounted on FOC2, and from there, automatically shared on all cluster members. So it's a little bit of a different hard disk setup than the first 2 disks we created, but it makes it really nice to have one disk that both machines can access at the same time. And this is where we're going to share this is where we're going to store our virtual hard disk for all of our virtual machines. So before we can configure virtual machines on FOC1 or FOC2, we need to install and configure HyperV on both these machines. With that being said, I don't know how far this lab will go because I've never ran virtual machines or even set virtual machines up on a virtual machine within ACE IT. Because remember, this is a virtual machine. So I'm going to try to host another virtual machine within this virtual machine. We'll see how far we get. So I'm going to go to Manage, Add Roles and Features. I'm on FOC1. I'm going to install HyperV on FOC1 first. HyperV. Add all the tools to manage it. So I can't do this. Give me 1 second, let me think about this. Okay, everyone, I really don't know how to get past this point. We hosted HyperV in the classroom. You'll see it in other classrooms, other classes. So I'm not really concerned if we can't go on from this point with this lab. But I just want to go over to tell you what I would have done. I'm going to click OK and press Cancel. So here's what I would have done. Once I've had HyperV installed, I would have went on both machines, FOC1 and FOC2. I would have went to HyperV here, and I would have went into HyperV settings. And at that point, I would have changed the location of where I stored my virtual hard disk and my virtual machines I wouldn't have used the default location. I would have used this location to store my virtual machines and the virtual hard disk for those virtual machines to here. And I would have done that in the HyperV settings. If you right click, if you go into HyperV, then go to HyperV settings, the first two things that I'd ask you for is where you want to store your virtual machines and where you want to store the virtual hard disk. I would put this location in both. They need to be identical because you can't have a setting on FOC2 that's different on FOC1. If you say you're going to store the virtual machine in a different location, when it jumped over to the different server, meaning a virtual machine jumped from FOC2 to FOC1, if the hard disk was stored in a different location, then at that point, the virtual machine would have crashed. I've also would have created a network inside of HyperV and done the same thing for FOC1 and FOC2, the same setting. Once I had HyperV, those three things set up, meaning on both HyperV setups, I would have had this as the hard disk location and the virtual machine location, and I want to set up a network inside of HyperV as well that was identical, meaning if I called it public on FOC1, I would have called it public on FOC2. Same spelling. I'm even kind of anal in the fact that I even keep the cases the same. So when a virtual machine jumps from FOC1 to FOC2, it has the same resources that it had on FOC1. Same network, same storage location for the hard disk and the virtual machine. Then once I've done that, I would have went back to this Failover cluster utility, and I would have walked through the procedure of creating a new virtual machine. I can't do that now because I can't host virtual machines on a virtual machine. But that's it for this lab. The only thing I want to show you that's for this class is file servers on failover clusters. Okay, that's it for this lab. Thank you.